At Seattle Soca, and I am at the Alias Studio in Tacoma, Washington, with Kim Davenport and Russell Brunton. And we are talking about music culture and some of the amazing stuff that Kim is going to be working on here in the near future, including dabbling with soca and the steel pan or steel drums, and even importing some of the steel drums from Trinidad and Tobago. So exciting stuff. So how are you guys doing today?
Great. Thank you for being here.
Nice, nice. It's amazing being here. Beautiful studio, and I feel so welcome. Guys, if you are into music, man, you're gonna feel so happy in this studio. You're gonna feel so happy. I see so much cool stuff, instruments and microphones. There's about 12 microphones in the corner there. I wish I could just have all of them. But today we're here to talk about the cool stuff that Kim is doing. So, Kim, could you tell us a bit about yourself and just let's let the audience know what you're up to.
Sure. Well, like I was telling you before, I wear a lot of hats, so that can sometimes confuse people. Like, wait, what's she doing now? So, I'm a piano player. I'm a classically trained piano player. I grew up in a family of musicians who played classical and jazz. Wow. So that's the music I grew up with. I actually grew up listening to more jazz than classical, because that's what my dad was doing when I was a little kid. And then I got more into classical when I started studying the piano. Nice. And so that pretty much my whole life, I've played the piano and taught the piano. That's a lot of what I do in this space is teach piano lessons. So, that's how Russell and I met, because he's one of my piano students. Nice. And then I also teach music classes at University of Puget Sound and University of Washington, Tacoma. And I got lots of stories to tell about how I got into the whole Trinidad and steel pan and all that. Yes. So it's all related to all of it, like teaching here and teaching my university students. And so
Great. So I know Russell had a bit to do with getting you into some of the soca. So, but Russell, first, give us a little bit about yourself as well.
Right. Yeah, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I've been in the U.S. for quite some time, but as a boy, I was in Trinidad. In the U.S., I lived here, worked here for over 30 years, and I started learning to play the piano about 15 years ago. I did take lessons for classical piano. I've been doing some jazz piano lately as well. And one of the great things this past year, I've been spending a lot of time kind of reconnecting with my Trinidad roots and learning more about the culture, learning about the music, listening to some soca music I haven't listened to in many, many years. And it's just been wonderful to kind of reconnect with that really rich cultural experience that is Trinidad and Tobago.
Great. And I definitely saw you out there. He was jumping and waving and misbehaving at the last Seattle Soca event. So it was really nice meeting him and sort of pull all of this together. Let folks know what we're doing exactly here in the PNW. So Kim, tell us, how did you decide Russell invigorating you to start playing the soca and getting into the culture? How did you get into it?
Yeah, I could go on about this all day, but I'll try to keep it short. It's really during the pandemic, and which of course coincided with Black Lives Matter and a lot of thought and conversation about race and equity and all of that, and that's become a really big part of my mission as a musician and a teacher. And I got into performing a lot more piano music, classical piano music by Black composers. It's kind of a mission of mine now, and that got me into introducing that to some of my students. Right. So Russell has played 2 or 3 different pieces in the last few years, not by Beethoven or Bach, which is what we were doing before, but by Black composers. And so it kind of opened this door for me of wanting to share more of that with my students. And then about a year ago, I got contacted by a textbook publisher and got asked to write a textbook. And I thought, I don't want to write a textbook. That's the last thing I want to do. But I teach a really diverse student population at UW-Tacoma, and I'm introducing them to classical music. And for a lot of them, they've never been introduced to classical music before, and it seems really like something that's not welcoming. It's a world that might not be welcoming to that student population. And
right.
So what this book is about is how to listen to music that's new to you. Like if it's a genre you've never experienced before, how do you approach listening to it? And so there will be some, kind of boring textbooky chapters, but then I wanted to have some chapters that really delve into like specific examples. And since I see Russell every week and we're talking about this music from this place that I've learned so much about, I'm realizing this place and the music that comes from this place would be a perfect feature in this book, because Trinidad is such a unique culture.
Yes.
It's an island culture, so that gives it that isolation of being separate from other places in a way that like America is not, with people constantly coming and going.
Yeah.
And also just the unique population, so diverse.
Yes.
More so than other Caribbean countries. It's fascinating to me.
Oh, yes.
And then you get into learning about the steel pan,
Yes.
which is such an amazing instrument. And so this is all relatively new to me.
Right.
And so I'm approaching writing the book that way. Like, this is new to me and it's new to my readers, and we're going to kind of jump in and explore this together.
That's amazing.
So that's kind of the approach I'm taking.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so some of the way that you're writing the book, is that also going to be infused into your teaching at the universities?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. So, I didn't want it to just be about, American music or classical music, or I wanted to have some sort of element of music from some other part of the world. And, this seemed like the obvious choice to me. And then, I discovered that, not only do I have this friend and student who can teach me about his culture, but we also have other people around town who are from Trinidad and can talk to me about their experience, and then also the steel pan specifically. And so I've interviewed some various people for this book chapter. So it's mostly going to be other people's words, not mine, because I'm the person who's new to it. So
Great,
that's my approach. Yeah.
So I want to peel back a couple things here that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So in previous conversations I would have had with folks talking about steel pan and why is it so hard for it to get on the university level, outside of, you might see it in middle schools and high schools.
Yeah.
But when you get into classical music, there's a bit of, red tape, when it comes to introducing any instrument after the 1900s. Am I correct?
That's right. That's right.
So, how are you going to sort of be one of the pioneers in peeling that back? And what are some of the challenges you see when it comes to, getting into the classical club?
Yeah. Well, part of the challenge always is that, right, it's an old institution, so it's stuck in its ways a little bit, right? There's what I'm encouraged by is there's a lot of people in the world of classical music right now that are trying to break down a lot of those barriers.
Okay.
I think what's so special about steel pan, from what I've learned so far, is this is an amazingly capable instrument. It can do almost anything, and then that's even more amazing given that it's had such a short history. Right. And, so talking to Obi, who I think you've talked to,
Yes.
Grew up here in Tacoma, grew up playing steel pan, and now he's earning his master's degree in steel pan performance at the only university in the United States where you can do that.
That's amazing.
He's hoping to break down some of those barriers, and any way I can help him do that, I'm going to be happy to do it. But yeah, it's definitely the world of music conservatories and music schools are really stuck in their ways for sure. So it's an uphill battle, but I think steel pan is what's going to make it work, because the instrument itself can really be its own ambassador.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you sit down on your piano or any person playing an instrument, part of an orchestra, you're going to be looking at your notes and playing the music. I find that with the steel pan, you never really see anyone with, looking at notes. They're just catching the rhythm and playing all these different tunes and melodies. And, so is there something to learn from that culture in terms of the way that, they rehearse and record the music?
Yeah. This is one of the things, we've had this conversation in your piano lessons over the years that, do you come at learning music from by ear and your memory and learning it that way, which is the way most people in most cultures around the world learn music, right? It's passed that way. Or is it approached this more like European classical way where we go through this strict training and learn to read those notes on that page and always abide by that no matter what? I think they can feed each other, and I think they they can both benefit from the other. One of the most amazing things, we've been looking at old footage of, steel pan going back to like the 1940s and 50s. YouTube is cool because you can find all this stuff, right? And one of the things that's coolest to me is, so obviously those players, especially going way back, I mean, those were essentially, gangs, right? Those were street kids. They didn't have, formal music education, right? They were learning together and learning how to build these instruments and play these instruments. But when given the chance, they played classical music. So I always think, I'm telling you this all the time, I always think there's more overlap than there is not. I mean, I think genres are more connected than they are not. Right. And I think anytime we can break down those walls that people think are there, for whatever reason, often it's race that people, think those people look different than me, so I can't approach that music. Well, but why? I mean, music is universal.
That's right.
You just need to try to understand it and try to get into it.
It's spiritual.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the experiences you've had with music on a spiritual level?
Oh, wow.
I think for Kim, it's all spiritual.
Well, okay, this is another. So Russell's been lots of inspiration to me in the last few years, and which is why I'm doing all the talking. I thought he should be here. One of the things I grew up listening to was, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is my dad was a classically trained musician, but he also was a jazz musician. Okay. And he was really amazing at just doing free improvisation. And I, as a little kid, I did not understand how he did that. Because I grew up around classical musicians reading music off a page, so I didn't understand how you could just make up something brilliant on the spot. That still, to me, in my whole life, is one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever had, is listening to that. Wow. Just someone making up brilliant music on the spot. And I, for years, didn't think I could even approach doing that. And then Russell was like, well, why? I mean, I don't even remember how you said it, but it was like, it just made it sound so obvious that I should try. So now I've gotten back into jazz myself and doing improvisation. Because to me, that, as somebody who was classically trained, I love classical music, and I love it, and I love that world, but I also feel that it can be a little bit strict and stifling. So getting into improvisation is where I find that.
It gets you to connect different parts of the music and,
just have a different experience with playing it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So are you going to go down to Trinidad, or have you been to Trinidad?
I've never been. Definitely want to.
So we take you to Trinidad and Tobago on a steel pan, or you can even go to Hollywood. I know there's a Hollywood Carnival as well. Yeah. I found myself on a steel pan truck in Hollywood one year. I don't even know how I ended up on there, but they had about 20 guys on there with different types of steel drums and steel pans and tenors and bass and everything, and they were doing it just as if they were in Trinidad for Carnival. So that's one of the really amazing things that you're gonna get to experience is a moving truck, steel pan, and they're just playing all the classic tunes and the new soca music, driving down the street. So I can't wait for you to experience.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to experience that too. Well, and I mean that's the other thing. It's kind of a couple separate topics are going to be in this chapter I'm writing for this book. I mean, there's steel pan as an instrument that has a whole cultural tradition around it, and brings in all these different ethnic traditions and all of that. And then there's also calypso and soca, and that's really, I mean, that's the exploration we've been doing together, is listening to all this music.
Right.
And I love the fact that soca is very accessible. Like I'm thinking about students, learning about a new genre. That's probably more accessible than like steel pan in a way, because it's dance music. It's popular dance music, but it's also very different than anything that came out of the United States.
Oh, yes.
So I don't know. How would you describe what's soca all about?
I think dance music is a good way of putting it. It's got a driving beat. It's the mainstay of the music for the carnival season. It's the mainstay of the music during the fetes, and even on the street during the carnival, the 2 days of carnival, Monday and Tuesday. So very much dance music, and very much sort of drives the big festival in Trinidad for carnival. Yeah. And generally the lyrics are sort of mostly focused on something having to do with the party scene.
Right.
Not always. Sometimes they have something either going on in the society or going on in the world of art, something current events. But usually it's pretty straightforward lyrics, and usually it's big on the hook. So it's got something really danceable, really singable, really easy to
Instructions.
lots of how to dance, right? Jump on wave, right? But very accessible, and you can sort of grasp it right away. So
What
Yeah.
so from your experience
Yeah.
in getting in depth in music,
Yeah.
what do you think are some of those things that make you instantly feel happy and
right.
full of joy when you hear soca?
Right. Well, okay. If we want to talk about it in terms of musical, I've been talking to Kim about this. North American pop music, it's in 4/4 time, but the beat is on the second and the fourth note. So you sort of change the chord on the first note of the measure, but on the second and the fourth is where the big beat is for North American pop music. But in soca music, the beat is actually on the 1 and the 3. So for me, that makes the music really driving, right? I think driving is kind of the word to use to describe how the music sounds, how you experience the music, how the music pushes you to dance, pushes you to jump, pushes you to whine, right? So for me as a music student and as a classical piano player, trying to understand what the music is doing and how it's doing it, and being able to relate that in terms of otherwise, more or less technical terms like what is it doing melodically, what is it doing harmonically, what is it doing in terms of the tempo, what is it doing in terms of the beat, and trying to understand what is it doing in those sort of, how does that translate to our experience of the music, right?
Yes.
So it's it's interesting to sort of get a little bit technical in that way, but soca is an easy music to experience, right? It's really easy. It doesn't take a lot to appreciate it, right? You don't have to do advanced study in the way that for other forms of music, right? So it's very accessible. At the same time, there's soca's been around since about the early 70s, and it's gone through certain periods where the music has different instrumentation. We talked about that recently with Kim, where there's a long period of time where there's a lot of trombones, and the trombones is what they call the brass section. And I love that instrumentation because it's so, the trombones blare, right?
Yes.
And they're used oftentimes in a percussive sense where it's driving the beat like a drum would be driving the beat, right? But at a much higher register and in a blaring, sound and blaring cadence, right? So it really pushes you to dance. I mean, when we were at Soca, Seattle Soca a couple weeks ago, for me, when I go in a fete and it's Soca, I have to dance right away.
Yeah. Everything just comes out.
Yeah, start dancing one
Leave it
time.
on the floor.
Start dancing one time. So maybe that's just me, but I think that's something to do with music too, right? But it's just great to be learning about soca, and YouTube is great because it's so much of it is there. So and then when you're tired looking for something, YouTube will give you something else.
Right. So guys, I mean, have you heard this sort of elegant speech about soca anywhere else? I doubt it. So you definitely want to share this with everyone. Go on Seattle Soca YouTube, because it's going to be on there. So you want to share this and hear this in depth. Russell just went very in depth into soca. I don't think I've heard anyone speak so elegantly in the way that it's organized, and he's speaking about the register and cadence and the percussion and the first and the third, and I think he might have let out some secrets from some of the producers, because I would have conversations with some of the producers and they would say, well, I'm not going to talk about where it drops on the first and the fourth. They never say anything about the first and the third. So we're going to have some conversations about making some soca, man.
Yeah,
definitely. So I don't know where I'm going now with this because I'm so excited now.
I might have it. So one thing Kim and I have been talking about is, like I said, in terms of the way soca has evolved over the years, right?
Yes.
I was in Trinidad 70s and 80s as a child, and in the 80s, soca started in the 70s, but soca really got going in the 80s, right?
Yes.
And I think on the streets for Carnival, it was more steel band during the 50s and 60s, right?
Okay.
But as I get into the 70s and the 80s, the soca music took over on the streets, right?
Wow.
So I started listening to soca a lot in the 80s. Some of the big bands at that time, big names at that time was a guy named Crazy.
Yes.
Crazy,
Uh-huh.
right? Scrunta, right?
Yes.
A little later on, I have Soca Baron, and then Sugar Aloes, right? So with all of these guys, all of the music is available on YouTube. You know, so I encourage anybody that interested in soca to look up soca 90s, soca 80s, and because
Yes.
I that's kind of part of soca I always love because it's very not only is it have a driving beat but very melodious, you know,
Yes.
just beautiful. They're beautiful voices and beautiful voices and the instrumentation is beautiful and melodically they're always doing something interesting, you know, the way they tie together with the lyrics. So that's the period of music that I like the most in terms of soca, 80s and 90s. As we get into the 90s, a fella named Super Blue. Super Blue kind of take over the scene.
Yes.
Right? So he had some songs like Bacchanal Time and Flag Party, right? And there were a number of musicians that were making very similar kind of soca, like that song like folk called Lara, Jump Up and Wave, right? So those songs were early 90s, mid 90s, and really spawned another 20 or 25, 30 years of music that's pretty similar in terms of the instrumentation and just the tone of the music. A lot of just beautiful music. And then, but that particular type of soca later on had some variations, right? So later in the 90s, they had a variation called Raga Soca,
Yes.
right? Which is kind of that Super Blue Soca. But they also had soca from the different islands, right? So the people from Barbados had a lot of hits in the late 90s, late 80s, late 90s. So they call that the Bajan invasion, right?
Yes.
Right. So it's nice to see how soca continues to modify and people try new things all the time in the 90s and the 2000s. And
Yes.
so I love following it. Yeah.
In the 21st century, they even started getting into electro house kind of.
Right.
It didn't last very long. I think after some of the international producers tried to get more. I think a lot of the producers and pioneers try to sort of hold on to the culture a bit, so maybe that puts a constraint on how far it's going to go because they don't want it to just get stolen. There's that fear of someone's going to steal it. But yeah, so I think in the 21st century we saw that. Right now it's groovy. Groovy soca and some other small islands like St. Lucia and Dominica and all these places, some of their and Haiti.
St. Vincent.
St. Vincent, some of their music is starting to, and it's all soca that transcended the borders, but they took it and added, whatever their, instrumental,
their voices.
were, into at that point. That's what they were infusing. Grenada is power soca, so that's like even faster. That's like 165 beats per minute. So, it's really good.
Afro soca.
So I think at some point it would be amazing if you or anyone were to take those different time periods of soca and put it on a piano and do, a full-on. Okay, here's the presentation on what was happening in this period of time.
Yeah, retrospective.
This is the piano version of it with the steel drums and steel. I think that would be amazing. I would love to see.
I think there's a project in works. I mean, if we keep working on it, we're gonna have to put the project together.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And that would be your capstone or your
Well, and I mean, to me, like you were just talking about all these different, people from different places now contributing making their own contributions to it. To me, that happens and can happen because what appeals to me about studying music from Trinidad and what I'm hoping I can pass on to students is tiny place, right? Small population relative to other countries, right? It's a tiny country in population, right? The same population as like the Seattle-Tacoma area, right?
Yes.
But it's an entire nation.
Yes.
And you have this amazing diversity of, roughly equal percentage of population of African and Indian, which my understanding is those groups, can be pitted against each other politically, and but musically, it's been amazing sharing and blending of cultures. And we talk about that in the United States too, right? The United States has produced things like jazz and blues and things that have come from cultural sharing and blending of music from different peoples and all of that. But to me, the idea that that happened in such a tiny place and such sharing between two equal-sized populations that both were oppressed, I just find it amazing. But it's also a natural environment where now we see other people able to contribute because the very nature of the music is it was formed by different people contributing.
That's right.
It's just magical, really.
Yeah. You know, and I think like the father of Soca, Ras Shorty, that was his intention to take instruments from the Indian instruments and the African instruments and sort of like cross-pollinate that and compose, Soca. And I think it probably even got away from his sort of main intention of it.
I've read that. He had times of being upset about it. It's not going where he wanted it to go. But even just that is fascinating to me, the idea that, especially as someone, classically trained on learning about music from hundreds of years ago, right? And it's a long tradition. Here we have really a very young country, especially an independent country. That's a very short history. And you have, both with steel pan and soca, you have a very recent invention. Steel pan's the only, as Ogie described, is the only new instrument invented entirely in the 20th century.
That's right.
And then you have soca as a new invented genre. This guy just says, I'm going to make a new genre. When does that happen?
Right. And
musical genres don't work that way. Usually they develop naturally over centuries and decades, but it's a very inventive people, clearly, coming from Trinidad. And it's just fascinating to me.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the influence from different countries as well, mainly France, Spain, Africa, India, I even read in some books that, some people, think that the calypso, some of the way that the calypso is, put together may have some of it come from France as well. There's stuff,
we were hearing also from Venezuela, called the Paran.
The Paran, yes.
Paran. The original Paran bands that still go about with little guitars. That's kind of how they started in Brazil. So much.
The quattros.
The
quattros. Right.
Yeah, so you can't. I mean, you can't discount any of the different contributions of any of the different people who created this.
And then the instrumentation of the time is a fairly global phenomenon, at least Western phenomenon, right?
Right.
Which, and it's interesting to look even at places like in Jamaica, and you look at the music of Jamaica in the 60s and 70s, it's the same, very similar instrumentation that they're using in Jamaica that they're using in American pop music.
Right.
So
Well, this is definitely a more distinct culture that's and of course there was American influence too, during the wartime.
Right.
So many different
drums.
Right.
I recently learned that there were 50,000 Americans during World War II living in Trinidad.
wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot. So, you cannot discredit the influence and the way that may have shaped the future of the culture as well.
That's right.
If you were to get into economics, right? I think the Trinidad trades, billions, 26 something billion or something with the United States in trade. So, that is, and that's the most out of any of the countries in that region.
And yet, when I talk to Americans, they know very little about Trinidad. That's the other reason this fascinates me. It's just that, why do we not bring more natural curiosity to things? And I mean, that's just the way I am. And students are like, yeah, there she goes again. But but I think it's too fascinating. I think more people need to know about it. And I'm on a mission now.
I love it. Let's take all the students and go to Trinidad.
Let's do it.
And do some soca research.
Well, there is a group at PLU that does that. They do it every year as a group at Pacific Lutheran University. They organize a tour to Trinidad the last many
25 years they've been going.
Wow. Yeah. And they go before Carnival and they get involved in the music culture and they go to the panyards and they play, and then after Carnival they stay in Trinidad for a while and they do some research at the university and it's pretty cool.
So there's a lot of Tacoma connection, which is
But people moving in silos.
Right. That's right. They
Yeah.
don't know. They don't know.
That's right.
Yeah, you don't know it, what's going on. So we need to, I like that you mentioned that, so I'm gonna have to figure
Check
out
those guys out.
those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put you in touch with some people.
Awesome, awesome.
Oh, I just forget to mention earlier when we talk about different kind of soca in the different parts of the world. You know who have pick up on those beats? Latin America. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of influence from Jamaican music and soca music in Latin America,
Uh-huh.
Mexico. You know.
With Dembow,
Yeah.
Dembow,
Yeah.
it's a little newer,
Yeah.
even Brazil as well.
Yeah.
But you look at the '90s dancehall,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's just they took '90s
That's
dancehall
right.
sample
That's
and they
right.
created a whole reggaeton and Dembow.
Reggaeton, that's
They
right.
created a whole genre out of it.
That's right. Out of the 90s done.
Yeah, out of
Yeah.
'90s dub.
And when I was in Trinidad in the 90s, we listened to so much done in Trinidad. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, we did the fets. During Carnival season, the fets were all Carnival, we were all Calypso and Soca, but outside Carnival season, it was a lot of them. A lot of them. Yeah. The European house and a lot of them. I live with the Calypso. But it's a keep the Calypso and Soca for the Carnival season.
Nice. So I think Calypso in itself as well.
Yeah.
It's so deep, Calypso and Kaiso. And that's the grandfather of soca.
That's
so,
right. That's right.
If you get into Calypso and Kaiso, that is a whole other bowl of
That's right.
greatness to jump into. So tell us about what you have coming up as far as the research that you did and
Yeah.
what came out of it, and
Yeah.
what the product that you have coming out of that.
Yeah, so I've read a couple of great books about this topic. We had a great conversation with the two of us, and then Obi, who's studying for his master's degree in Illinois, and he was on Zoom with us, and then Dr. Greg Utes, who's out at Pacific Lutheran University, and he's led that study abroad program for many years. So all these people with a Tacoma connection, but also a Trinidad connection. We had this great conversation. It's about 20 pages of text that I typed out transcribing that conversation, and now I have to kind of turn that into a book chapter, and that book will come out next fall, and I'm going to be using it in all of my classes that I teach, but also I have colleagues around the country who I'm talking to about using it in their classes, so that'll get a lot more people introduced to this subject. And then I'm sure it will become something more than that, because I don't think I can let go of this, especially because I'm going to be adding steel pans to the studio. They are currently on order from Trinidad. It should be here in the next few weeks. So
Amazing.
I'm not leaving it behind once the book is written. It's definitely going to be an ongoing part of what I'm interested in. So yeah.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
And I've seen what Soca has done in Japan.
Mhm.
Folks, I think they got bit by the same bug that you got bit by.
Yeah.
So
Is that right? Japan has a big soca movement.
yeah,
It is good.
that's what Japan Soca. They do all these events and they have steel pans and So the cool thing about soca in itself as well is that it sort of creates an ecosystem.
Mhm.
Anywhere it touches down,
Yeah.
it creates an ecosystem, right? You look at the big festivals like Burning Man and all these different things, but they're usually in a remote place, away from everybody. But soca has a way that it just invites everybody to be festive and make a little money, and so it's just amazing. And we need to, aside from the wine and wave and the cultural aspect that we get is a little bit different, right? So some people might look at wine and wave and say, okay, that's too much for me. I don't want to wine and grind up with anybody and stuff like that. But I think for us in Trinidad, it teaches you self-control, and it teaches you how to prepare yourself for for a long march. Set goals, right? So be fit for the road, and and I think back to the self-control part, being able to see a young lady, dressed with, short stuff and not really, think about it in a negative way. Just, think about expression, right? And I think we need some of that, to be able to have expression and be, comfortable with folks expressing themselves and things like that. And so I think those things are great things that we can extract from the soca culture. Yeah. So, let us know. So you're going to be composing tell us about the great CD
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
music, and that's going to be streaming. That's going to be composing.
Yeah, so this has nothing to do with Trinidad really, but this goes back to me wearing a lot of hats all at the same time. Yeah, I just finished this big recording project, and my album is, well, the physical CD is printed. I have those in my house now, but it'll also be on Spotify and all the places, all the streaming
Right.
places. But it's music by a Black British composer from the late 1800s, early 1900s, who was the son of a African father and a white British mother, and he never knew his father. So he had this lifelong fascination with wanting to know more about that musical culture. So he wrote these pieces called 24 Negro Melodies that pull from African folk songs and African American spirituals. And then he set them for solo piano, this very romantic, lush, classical solo piano. It's about 90 minutes of music and really challenging. So this was like the last year of my life was devoted to learning and recording this music. So I'm very excited to get it out there. It hasn't gotten the exposure that I think it deserves, so that's why it was
Right.
worth it to me to invest in this big project. So
Well,
people can listen to that soon.
I hope someone like John Legend and Alicia Keys can hear about this and get involved and bring it, help you bring it on an even bigger grand scale. I think
It's beautiful music.
Yeah.
And like Soca and Calypso and Steel Band, it's black music, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
black 20th century music.
It's amazing.
And that's why it hasn't gotten as much exposure as it should have in the world of
Should have,
classical
yeah.
music, because
Right.
that's been so white dominated, and that's something I personally want to try to change within my sphere of influence. I want to try to
Yes.
change that. So
Yeah, and I've played some of that music, and it's as rich and as beautiful and as technically complex as any Beethoven or Brahms. It's similar to Brahms, but richer than Brahms. I think it is, in a certain sense, different.
Guys, this is uptown.
Don't go more Brahms, no.
We're in uptown Tacoma right now. So, what are you gonna do? You're gonna give us a little snippet.
yeah, I'll give you a little snippet of that music.
So, guys, we're gonna get a sample of what's about to come out with the 24 Negro. Help me out.
24 Negro Melodies.
24 Negro melodies.
And the composer is?
Samuel Coleridge Taylor.
Samuel Coleridge Taylor. So get familiar and make sure to subscribe. Let people know about this interview. This is an amazing interview with Russell
Brunton.
and Kim Davenport. So let's hear it.
All right.
Nice. Very beautiful.
That was great.
That was
Thanks,
great.
Kim.
That was amazing. Yes. So yes, guys, there you have it. We're here at the studio. Alia Studio in Tacoma, and we're talking about Soca, and Kim is getting into the steel pan, and she's also composing a new book that she's going to be releasing about the steel pan and Caribbean music and Trinidad and Tobago and soca and all this amazing stuff. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
allowing me to interview you. This is way in advance of where you are on your current project. So this is amazing. I'm getting the what do you call it?
The sneak peek.
The sneak peek. Yes, I'm getting the sneak peek. So definitely like and share. We had some amazing conversations today, and looking forward to sharing some more about this project. So,
Thank you.
is there anything else you want to share?
I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about it. Yeah, this has been great.
Where can they find you on social media?
That's a good question. Yeah, I got my YouTube channel, just my name, Kim Davenport. Find out more about these recordings, and yeah, that's probably the best.
Shout out to Seattle Soca.
Yeah.
Trying to get those silos together. Right?
Yeah.
Break
Sure.
down all the barriers and
Yeah.
silos. Bring
Yeah.
all the soca and all the all the great folks that are instrumentalists. Get them all into soca, so we could just create something even more amazing and cross borders.
Yeah,
It's gonna be great.
that's what music is for.
Yes. Thank you. All right, guys, we are gone. We're gonna go balance. We're not gonna drop soca today, but you're gonna hear about some soca on this episode. Thank you.